You will not get a score of 1500 on the SAT unless you master these two skills, and those are paraphrasing and summaries. The major problem that students have when overcoming the 1500 mark is because of logical reasoning and reading comprehension questions. They'll read a passage and not understand what it talks about, go down to the answer choices, get confused even more, and then reread the passage all over again. And for a slow reader, like a lot of people, including me, if you do that, then you've already burned 2 minutes of your time, and it will put even more pressure on you, making you perform worse for the following questions. What these people don't realize is that the whole text always talks about one specific topic. It never goes outside of that topic. College Board isn't allowed to go outside of the scope of the passage. So when you feel like the text is talking about one thing and then completely switches to another topic, you're being tricked. The test makers, they're deceiving you by using different words, but in actuality, they're just referring back to the same thing. The second thing is summaries. Some texts are often very long. They contain lots of information, and if you couple that with paraphrasing, you'll have a lot of trouble reading those passages. So, what you need to do is you need to make dumb summaries, summaries that get to the point and that a lot of the times just removes unnecessary information. For example, the name of the researcher. A lot of passages will include names of researchers like Dr. Aaron and his colleagues. I can guarantee you, in every single passage that I've ever read, it's useless. You only need to remember the initials. Dr. Maria, you can turn that into Dr. M. And her colleagues, you remove that. You don't need and her colleagues or and a group of another researchers. You don't need those types of information because those are for filler. College Board, they're making you think that you need those. In actuality, I can just remove that whole part and it will not affect my accuracy. Another thing is scientific names, right? So, name of a type of fish, a type of lion, disease, phenom- phenomenon. You have to shorten it. And sometimes you can even discard it, but I don't recommend it because you might miss some crucial information. You use the same strategy with the names of the researcher, right? So maybe Arctic fox something. Arctic fox name something. Maybe B something. You can just name it B. Use the first word of that name and it'll be so much easier to keep up with the whole thing and not having to remember all of the names. Whenever I read a specific passage, researcher Maria and her colleagues' report, the changes in climate. The changes in climate is what matters, not the name. I'll apply what I'm teaching you right here and I'll apply to three questions with increasing difficulties. All right, beginning with question one. Let's use blue. Microbes that live in shallow lakes and ponds produce methane, which is a harmful greenhouse gas. Okay, so we're at the part where it says ecologist and his team, so we're just gonna cross this whole thing out right here. We're gonna rename that A, ecologist A. We only need the first dude. Ecologist A wanted to see how different types of shallow water plants. So it's referencing the shallow water lakes right here, might affect the amount of methane that escapes into the atmosphere. Okay, so you see, microbes produce methane, and plants release methane. So you see a relationship between microbes and plants. You have to be very careful of that because a lot of people, when they get to this part, they'll think that it's completely that it's talking about plants, which is a completely different topic. Next, A's team set up some water tanks with soil and microbes, so it's referencing this again, from local ponds. Some tanks had a type of underwater plant, okay, so underwater, that grows in soil called water milfoil, so we'll call that W. Other tanks had either duckweed, a type of plant that floats on the water surface, or algae. Okay, so you pay attention to this. This is where paraphrasing becomes very useful. Underwater and on the plant water surface, these two are opposite meanings, which means there's two types. One is underwater and one is on the water surface. I'm expecting that they're going to make a comparison between the two. I haven't read the rest of the passage, but that's what I'm expecting. Okay, so cross out this. A found that tanks with duckweed or algae. So it's talking about tanks with plants that sits on the water surface released higher levels of methane than tanks with water milfoil did. This finding suggests that, okay, so let's recap. Next, so water milfoil released less methane and duckweed released more methane. This implies, right here, that plants that sits on the water surface will release more methane than plants that sits underwater. So it's very simple. If you learn to paraphrase and you break it down step by step, you arrive at this summary right here. You don't even need this. This is completely irrelevant. You only need this, right? This is what I'm expecting the answer choice to look like. So let's go down. The presence of some kinds of underwater plants, so water milfoil, or plants like water milfoil, helps prevent methane from escaping shallow lakes and ponds. This is a good answer choice. Helps to prevent. This means that it is reducing the amount of methane that is escaping. But I do find the wording to be weird. A lot of people, they get to this point, they see the word prevent, and they just think that this is wrong. But that is an incorrect way of doing things. A lot of the times, College Board, they will use words like prevent right here, and they'll trick you into thinking that it's the wrong answer. But once again, it's paraphrasing. So you have to be very careful with that. I'm going to keep this answer choice. I'm going to keep it right here. And I'm going to see if there are any more answers that is better suited. Okay, so shallow lakes and ponds release more methane than deeper bodies of water because shallow bodies of water usually have more plants than deep bodies of water do. So you have to be very careful here. Shallow lakes and ponds, they're referencing to on the water surface, and deeper bodies of water, they're referencing to underwater, right? So technically, they're just taking these words right here, and they're paraphrasing it and putting it into answer B. But notice underwater and on the water surface, they're talking about plants, and this is talking about lakes and ponds right here. And the two are completely irrelevant. So you have to be very careful of that. And secondly, the passage never talked about deeper bodies of water. So we can get rid of answer choice B right here. Next, shallow lakes and ponds are likely to contain more algae than either water milfoil or duckweed. Once again, this is incorrect. The passage never talked about the proportion of plants present within each body of water. So this is incorrect. It does mention algae right here, and water milfoil and duckweed, but never talked about the abundance. Alright, down to answer D. Having a mix of algae, underwater plants, and floating plants. So notice, first of all, a mix is already setting off red flags in my brain. Because there's no mention of a combination or a mix. So already I'm thinking this answer choice is incorrect. Let's see. Floating plants and underwater plants. So notice it's referencing this and referencing this. Next. Is the best way to reduce the amount of methane in shallow lakes and water ponds. Never talked about combining the two. If you combine the two, maybe it will increase the amount of methane that gets released. Or maybe it will reduce the methane that gets released. Or maybe no methane gets released at all. And the thing is, we don't know because the passage never said anything about that. So you can see clearly A is correct. Okay. In our 2021 article, Throwaway History. Okay, so we don't need this. We just know that it's an article. Scholar Annie Garner. So we're gonna get rid of this and we're just gonna call it. So, Scholar A talks about something in her 2021 article. Discusses John Johnson. So, J, I'm gonna call him J. A collector. We don't need devoted. A collector of items intended to be discarded, including bus tickets and campaign pamphlets. So the J collects discarded items. J recognized that scholarly institutions considered his expansive collection of ephemera to be worthless. Ephemera just basically means throwaway stuff that are of no use. Right. So his expansive collection once again is talking about this items that are being discarded. His expensive collection of ephemera to be worthless. it wasn't until 1968, after his death, that Oxford University's Bodleian Library acquired the collection. So you see, if I just zoom in, scholarly institutions is Oxford University. Or a better way to put it is one of the scholarly institution is Oxford University. So essentially, it's talking about the same thing. Oxford University is a scholarly institution, while we don't know whether Oxford University rejected it, rejected his collection. We do know that the university later on acquired the collection right here. But the reason that I highlight this word is I want to demonstrate just how much College Board paraphrase, and that if you aren't careful, then you might you might not notice these, and you might just lose the whole point of the passage, or get lost, or get confused, and it's going to be a very tricky situation since you have to reread the whole thing. Okay, so now we know we have a connection between scholarly institutions and Oxford universities. So we know exactly what the passage is talking about, and we know that the passage always talks about the same thing, right? Having grasped the item's potential value to historians and other researchers, hence the example of Johnson serves to do what? All right, so this is where the dumb summaries come in. You got this dude J that has a collection that was previously rejected. Now, this collection is accepted because historians recognize the potential value that it brings. Because value. Cool. This is what the passage is talking about. So, in my mind, I'm thinking that first, this is what my expectation of what the answer choice is going to look like. I think that first, an item or collection will be rejected, and then it will be accepted because people recognize its value. It goes something along the lines of that, or it will include some element of this. Okay, so let's go down. Demonstrate the difficulties faced by contemporary historians in conducting research at the library without access with ephemera. Never talked about difficulties that historians face. So wrong. Represent the challenge of incorporating examples of ephemera into collection. Okay, represent the challenge of incorporating ephemera into the collection of libraries and other scholarly institutions. It doesn't really follow my expectation of the answer. I'm a little bit sensitive on the word challenge. It does, I believe that it does mention examples of ephemera, which is John's, an example of ephemera is John's collection of discarded items. But challenge is I guess kind of works. I'm not really too sure. I'm not really sure because at first he did get his collection did get rejected, so you can consider that challenge, but never described like the hardships or or the problems or the obstacles he had to overcome before getting that collection to be accepted. So I'm not really sure about the word challenge. Lend support to arguments by historians and other researchers who assert that ephemera holds no value for scholars. This is completely backwards. The passage is talking about how the collection got accepted. This is saying that the collection still get rejected. So no, this is wrong. All right. Okay, now to answer D. No. Illustrate, yes, because the whole passage is talking about that. Both the relatively low scholarly regard. Yes, so worthless right here. In which ephemera was once held. Once held. This is it wasn't until 1968 right here. And the later recognition of ephemera's possible utility. So utility is potential value. Later recognition is Oxford University. Later recognition is acquiring it and having okay, I'm gonna use a different ink. Let me just I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna use green. Later recognition is having grasped right here and acquired. So you can see that the correct answer choice is obviously D, and the fact that every single bit of detail is present within the passage, and those detail is hidden behind the walls of paraphrasing, of summarizing, and if you just slow down, take a look, you'll realize that every single hard problem is like this. B is incorrect because I don't. First of all, the word challenge makes me very suspicious. And second of all, we found a better answer choice, D. We found a better answer, so we chose that. All right, the last problem. It's the hardest problem in today's video. Let's go. Marta Coyle and colleagues. So let's just get rid of that. We'll color C. Alright, so we don't even need this. Essentially, it's just a report right here. Census. Census reported approximately 17,000 species, nearly double the number reported in Carlo Bianchi and Carlo Mori. So B, and use different ink. In B and M's 2000 census. So there's two census, census by C and census by B and M. Census C is 17,000, which is double that of M. Alright. The difference is partly attributable to the description of new invertebrate species in the interim. So they're saying that part of the reason that there are new species there are more species reported is because of the new invertebrate species right here. Another factor is the morphological variability of microorganisms poorly understood. Compared that to vertebrates, invertebrates, plants, and algae, creating uncertainty about how to evaluate microorganisms species. So researchers, so it essentially means that researcher, I'm thinking that it's referencing to B and M and C. Can be highly consequential, which is this right here. Indeed, the two census reported similar counts of vertebrate, plants, algal species, suggesting that. Okay, so what they're saying is that the reason that there's a difference in the reported number is because of invertebrate species and microorganisms variability, and how the researchers tackle this problem can affect the number of reported species right here. And the last sentence says that the two reports have similar counts of vertebrate species, plant, and algal species, suggesting that these two are the reason that there's a difference in this count. No, I'm gonna find an answer that either involves this, or involves both. But I'm gonna prefer variability because the passage does state that invertebrate species only contribute partly to the difference in count. So yeah, let's go. So C reported much higher number of species than B and M. Much higher, so it's following the passage, nearly 17,000 and doubling that of B and M, largely due to the inclusion of invertebrate species that had not been described. Okay, so invertebrate species, yes, we do have invertebrate species right here, but largely is incorrect because the passage state that the reason is partly. Next, some difference observed in microorganisms. Differences so may have been treated as variations within species by Bianchi and Mori, so B&M, but treated as distinct species by C. So let me just get rid of this so you understand what I'm saying, what B is saying. Differences right here is variability. So variability that is observed in microorganisms may have been treated as variations within the same species by B and M, but as distinct species in C. So they're saying, so this is, yeah, I like this answer because it is saying that B and M are considering the variations as just one species, while C is considering the variations as distinct species. So that is the reason that there is a higher reported number of species. So I like that. Next, B and M may have been less sensitive to the degree of morphological variation displayed within typical species of microorganisms than C. Okay, I have a problem with this. So C is less sense. C is more sensitive. and B and M is less. If B and M is less, wouldn't that mean that they would consider variations to be distinct species? Whereas C, with more sensitivity, will notice that these variations are just variations within the same species. So in actuality, this is saying that B and M have more species of microorganisms than C, which is the opposite, and doesn't explain why there is a 17,000 species difference between C and B and M. So this answer is backwards. C is backwards. The absence of clarity regarding how to differentiate among species of microorganism. Absence of clarity right here is poorly understood. All right. May have resulted in C underestimating the number of microorganism species. We don't know underestimating. This is incorrect. The passage never stated that C underestimated the number of microorganisms. So yeah, B is correct. And that's it. If I think by now you understand the importance of paraphrasing. Very hard questions, especially questions that after reading a few sentences you don't understand what it is saying at all. Those especially are riddled with paraphrasing. So you have to master this skill and master dumb summaries here, right here, so that you understand what the passage is talking about. You understand the core idea, and you know what the correct answer is going to look like, right? I paraphrase so that I understand what the passage is talking about. I make summaries so that I have the core idea. I grasp the core idea, and I have an expectation of what the correct answer is going to look like. So you see, if you don't have one of the two skills that is mentioned, you're going to be at massive disadvantage. I'll be continuing to make videos like this in the future, sharing my thought process, explaining tips on how to perform better in both the verbal section and the math section. I do have a course that is in the making, which in that course will cover math, every single topic that is going to appear in the math section, tips on how to save time, on how to do hard questions, Desmos, how to use Desmos, how to master Desmos to solve really hard questions, traps that is present in very hard questions, and will also include practice problems as well. The same thing with verbal. We'll cover every single topic. We'll have practice questions. We'll have tips and tricks. And we'll have a lot of material, as in words, new words that you can learn, grammar rules, everything like that. I hope you liked this video. You can share it with your friends or with somebody that is struggling with the verbal section of the SATs. Help them increase their score.